Here. My name is Joshua Pechtold. I'm president of the California Federation of Teachers, and it is my great honor, thank you, to kick off this discussion. We have some fantastic speakers who are going to talk about the work they're doing in their locals to build a new kind of social justice movement. When we see this kind of response, it reminds me of a line from my favorite book and favorite movie, The Grapes of Wrath, where Reverend Casey meets up with Tom Joad and Jim Casey, and he says to Tom at the very beginning, he says, "There's something going on out there, and I need to find out what it is." And that's what's happening here. The emergence of social justice unionism really comes out of probably in the 1930s, but more recently in the 1960s, as a response to sort of traditional bread and butter trade unionism. And social justice unionism put forward the notion that as unions, as rank and file members, we could no longer be simply about improving salaries and benefits. We had to be about building ties with community, taking up their issues, and expanding the labor movement to fight for social justice, not simply, of course, as we do want to fight for salary and benefits, that's part of social justice, but we had to expand that. And that's taken, obviously, a very important and interesting twist, and I would say it's been led by education unions. We could have a whole separate panel about education unions internationally doing that, but it has come home to the United States in very important ways, and we wanted to highlight those by our speakers today, but maybe even more importantly, have it begin a discussion, a dialogue with all of you. Part of what we're trying to do is create a dialogue, a respectful dialogue, so that even if there are differences, and I'm not sure there will be, but if there are, that we respect those differences, that we engage this discussion in a way that moves us forward in this discussion. I know Randy is going to be here in a moment to also make a couple of comments, and I think it's absolutely significant that we have some of the key leaders of the AFT being part of that discussion, including Randy herself.
It's great to see so many people here. I taught in South Los Angeles for 22 years. I live in South Los Angeles, down the street from the school that I taught at, Crenshaw High School, for many years. And I was a part of building an organization in the late 90s called Coalition for Educational Justice that was a parent, teacher, and student collaboration, different from the CEJ from New York, but, you know, sisters in spirit, I guess. But it gave us some practice at looking at what social movement unionism might mean. And so to me, when I think about social movement unionism, I think about a few different things. It's unionism that is democratic. It's unionism that is engaged with members. It's unionism that is engaged with parents and community beyond giving a check to a couple community organizations, but actually in real work together over the course of years. It's explicit about fighting for racial and social justice. It's explicit in fighting against privatization. It's explicit in taking people on who need to be taken on, including a lot of Democrats. And finally, it's a unionism that is willing to strike. It's a unionism that is willing to build to a strike and strike if that's what we need to do. I'll give you a couple of examples. One microcosm and one macrocosm, but I see those as connected. Because anything that social movement unionism is trying to build has to start and end at the school site, has to start and end with power at every school. So I'll give you one example from a school site, and then I'll scale that out a little bit. At Crenshaw High School, where I worked for many years, we explicitly worked with parents to build a coalition called the Crenshaw Cougar Coalition. Teacher members were very involved. Parents were very engaged. These parents met for 7 years every Monday night. This group was explicit about racial justice demands. Why is it that our school, with entirely African American and Latino population, does not have the same access to counselors, school psychologists, technology, even working telephones in the classroom when other schools do? It's very explicit about demands on the district. The coalition was explicit in anti-privatization, pushed back 2 efforts of charter schools to come in and try to take over the school. Was explicit in taking on heavy hitters within the Democratic Party. At the time of the struggle that I'm talking about, Roy Romer, who was the chair of the Democratic National Committee, was our superintendent in LAUSD. And we had a big fight and a big brawl with Roy Romer. What was good is that this actually grew, and parents and school chapters and eventually the entire union got behind this more resources for South LA movement. And we were able to shake out a bunch of millions of dollars for big high schools, comprehensive high schools, overcrowded high schools in South LA. Now, the important thing about this was that that coalition grew again, and it showed to me elements again of social movement unionism. And it grew again when Superintendent Romer reached down into the school and transferred me in clear retaliation for the organizing work that we were doing. The community rose up, and within 3 months, I was returned to the school because of community pressure. The second thing, it grew again when one of our key parent leaders, Khalid Al-Alim, who lives in the Hyde Park section of LA, which is a little bit different from Hyde Park of Chicago. Hyde Park is one of the most underserved, most neglected, most dangerous areas in the city. And Khalid Al-Alim, one of our parent leaders, was beat up by the LAPD when he was trying to defend a group of young people from his apartment complex who were on the corner and who were getting harassed by the police. Khalid got beat up, and worse, they charged him with attacking a police officer. So our social movement unionism at our school in South LA had a challenge. We're teachers now who had just seen the benefit of parents fighting to get their chapter chair back at the school. That was in my situation. Were we now going to fight for Khalid and take days off from school to go down to the courtroom and demand that he be able to be released and with charges dropped and be able to take care of his health? And we were able to win that by a big pressure campaign and a public campaign, and we got him out. The third thing that we saw was deep leadership development. So not only people like Khalid, but people like Channing Martinez, who was a student, who now is a full-time organizer with the Labor Community Strategy Center, picked up skills to not only go to college, but now to be a full-time organizer. Rhonda Adway, another parent, who actually turned the CCC, Crenshaw Cougar Coalition, into a 501c3 so that it could be institutionalized as an organizing group. So leadership development is another key aspect. So our challenge now, and I'll end with this, our challenge now in Los Angeles is to take that kind of microcosm work that was in South LA and actually now, as president, as vice president, as the other officers in the room that we ran with and won, is to take that citywide. We took office on July 1st, so this is about our 11th day. And one of the first things we did after the election, which ended on April 29th, is get out to the schools to make sure that everyone's got a chapter chair. Because we've been in a moribund status with a lot of schools without chapter chairs. Then we put out a letter in June. Again, before we're in office, put out a letter in June saying explicitly to our members, we may have to strike. This district is not moving on fundamental things that kids and educators need, and we may have to strike, so start saving money each month. We got overwhelming response from our members positively about that letter. The third thing that we did in June, again, before we took office, but we felt like it was important to set the table, was we got down to the school board and we stood with community organizations around a resolution to target funding to high-need schools and around a resolution to put money into restorative justice so that students are not being suspended and expelled from school and dropping out. And the fifth thing that we did just in our first formal board meeting, this was a couple days ago, is we brought a pretty sweeping plan of reorganization to our board of directors, and it passed unanimously in 5 parts. UTLA has not had a political director, has not had an organizing director, has not had an executive director, has not had a researcher, has not had a parent community organizer. We brought in a sweeping proposal 3 days ago to bring those positions in, work with our affiliates so that they can support us bringing those in, and it passed unanimously, and we feel like we're going in the direction we need to go. And with us, with our dues at a level that is half of what Chicago's dues are, we know that we've got to actually, we know that we've got to actually, over the next year and a half, combine our contract campaign and community campaign with a dues restructuring campaign. There is no way around it if we want to be financially stable. And so we brought that in as well. So I'll end with this. We're starting school a la Chicago, what Karen and others taught us, with a blitz of school site visits where everybody that we can get out to schools is going to be out in schools. And not just to talk to people, but to survey people face to face with, this is what you've told us you want to go, what direction you want to go in, tell us whether it is, add what you want to add, and we'll come back at the leadership conference in September and get this social movement unionism rolling. Thank you very much for taking the time to be here.
They ask us to look at these 3 questions: the political landscape in our state and city. Well, quite frankly, it's been a nightmare. Yeah. The mayor of the city of Chicago is absolutely... Yeah, he's got a 29% approval rating, so...
You had something?
I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened. So this guy came in with actually almost his entire platform was teacher bashing. He started out talking about teachers got raises, kids got the shaft. So that was a headline in one of the newspapers. He said that we were lazy, we had the shortest school day on the planet, and our children were losing, compared to Houston, 4 years of education by the time they graduated. Now, none of this was true, but if you say it over and over again, we have a mayor that believes in governance by press release. So, and spin. So, we have in the state of Illinois, Democrats control the governor's mansion, they control the House, and they control the Senate. And yet, when we came in 2010, we had a different mayor. His name was Richie Daley. He decided not to run, and then we got this guy. So, yeah, I'm done with this guy, right? So then, the year before we were elected, the House and the Senate passed a pension bill that put in a 2-tiered pension system. And the Illinois Federation of Teachers and the Illinois Education Association, we're not a merged state, decided not to fund a certain amount of Democrats. And so in retaliation for that not funding, and some people who were supposedly our friends lost their seats, we were hit with Senate Bill 7, which was an ALEC bill that had run in Colorado, basically. The same template, the same way it was done, was run in Illinois. In addition, so I went to like 1 million of these meetings, and they were never talking about Chicago until I had to have surgery. And then that day, for some reason, they decided to talk about Chicago. But, you know, so in addition, they really wanted to stop us from being able to strike. without taking that right away. So they thought if they put in a really high margin of how many of our members had to vote for a strike, that we couldn't do it. And not only did they do that, the best part was Jonah Edelman went to the Aspen Ideas Festival and bragged about it. And what I love about it is these people who love data so much are always wrong about stuff. So what he used was the contract referendum. Now in the past, the way that the past administrations would actually push a contract through is to say, you know, this is the best contract since sliced bread, you know, just do it. You know, you'll love it. So what they would do, though, is have it voted on in the summer when nobody was around. And, you know, you'd get some really low participation rate. And then they say, oh, the contract was ratified. Okay? So there are plenty of people here, like George Schmidt, that could tell you I'm not making that up. So anyway, that's what they used. Well, so we had a 75% threshold. And some of our members wanted to eat me alive when this happened and it came out. And I said, look, if 75% of your members don't want to go, if you can't get 75% of your members to take a strike vote, you don't need to go on strike. You will lose that strike because you're going to have people crossing that picket line. In 2012, do you know how many people crossed the picket line in 2012? I think it was 11, wasn't it? Was it 15? It was, well, there were a couple I wasn't so sure of, but maybe 15. But out of 46,000, I mean, out of 29 to 30,000, 15, I don't think it's so bad. Yeah. But that strike wasn't called because we were peaked. Now, mind you, the mayor came after us very strong. He did some direct dealing with our members and threatened them first. We're going to close your school down if you don't agree to work a longer school day this year. Cause I know you all have heard he cussed me out, right? Yeah. You've heard that story. So I got cussed out because I asked him about his longer school day. I'm like, why are you so stuck on this? You know, it's like, what's that about? And he goes, I can't have kids on the street at 1:30 and 2:30 in the afternoon. I said, oh, so this is a babysitting warehousing plan. This isn't an educational plan. Then F you, Lewis, you know. That's what he said. And then, you know, I'm from the South Side, so it didn't stop there. So anyway, all right, so that was one fight. But so we were able to stop the direct dealing, but I couldn't even get support from labor on this. And to me, direct dealing is like at the heart of the collective bargaining process. And I couldn't get some of these, you know, labor guys to help me. It's like, can you just stand up and acknowledge that this isn't a good thing? So I said, okay, I'm out here by myself. So the good thing is that what people don't understand, I get all the credit for leading the strike, and trust me, it had nothing to do with me. It was a focused movement of people having conversations, building by building by building, talking to people, asking questions, but mostly listening. And it was also every one of our members going and testifying at the Board of Ed meetings. And again, our Board of Ed meetings are always downtown in the middle of a day on Wednesday. So you have to take a personal business day if you are working in a school to go testify. And then you have to sign up. The board calls your principal and asks your principal, what is it you're about to talk about? I love how my principal used to deal with. He said, it's Karen Lewis. Have you not heard her? Why are you asking me? Are you opening a charter school or closing a school? That's what she's down there about. But we all took turns. We have shared leadership in our union. People want to come to me, the politicians want to come to me and say, Karen, can you give me X amount of money? I said, I don't make those decisions. Those are decisions made by our membership, our rank and file. The key to social movement unionism is that it must come from the ground up. That's where it happens. People ask me, well, why are you doing so-and-so? Why are you saying so-and-so? And that's what the members told me to do. And that's what I'm supposed to represent. So, I'm good at it, all right? I have some skill sets along those areas, but it's not Karen's ideas. It's sitting around envisioning. And this is what we did before we ever got elected. We said, if we could dream a union, what would it look like? We got an organizing department. We got a research department. We'd never had those. And we did it by taking pay cuts, taking the scale of a regular teacher, prorated out to a 52-week. We were able to afford that. A lot of the old guard decided to retire, so that was some money we had. So there are ways to get creative about these things. But I will tell you that what more we have to do is to continue to change the political landscape, because you can't work all these things if you're doing all this great work, but you've got laws that are stacked against you. So you cannot forget the political. You have to figure out a way to change that. So I'm proud to announce tonight that there are at least 3 or 4 of our members who are running in the aldermanic races. Because you have to build a progressive infrastructure. You cannot just rest on a personality here or a personality there. We have got to change the way these people think. We have to hold them accountable. And those of us that do not have an elected representative school board suffer because we have no place to take our grievances except to Springfield, and Springfield doesn't want to micromanage CPS. So the key is you have to find a balance, and you have to work with your parents. Listen, here's the beauty. Think about it. Those of us in buildings that are working with children, we have a direct access to the parents that none of these AstroTurf organizations can do. And it's not about us telling parents, we want your help, when you've never had a conversation with them. I've told our members over and over again, the first conversation you have with a parent cannot be, your child is driving me crazy. That cannot be the first conversation. You have to work with a relationship before you can get there. So, listening, responding to the needs of your community make all the difference in the world. And it's member-driven, member-driven, member-driven.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I want to ensure that Sister Lewis has the real facts on that information from Houston. While the numbers may be on paper, it's complete BS, because we know that if you do it to the community and not build it with them, they won't come. And our kids didn't come when they changed those hours. Our families didn't come when they changed those hours. So we backtracked on that. So Mr. Rahm Emanuel is wrong on his data because it's not real data. And that's one of the first places that we have to consistently challenge, is challenge the things that come out with what's the real information on our schools, in our campuses, and in our communities. We have not had the luxury of a collective bargaining agreement in Texas because it's illegal. The good part about that is that we've had to organize all the time. And everybody is in a school organizing, and if it doesn't happen, we don't survive. So that's part of that piece. So we have had a little bit of being able to go down that track as part of our DNA for the simple circumstances that relate to the laws and the practices that are in place. Houston is no bastion of social movement, no bastion of justice. If there is any place that needs some justice right now, it's my home state. Because what's happening to children on the borders of my home state breaks my heart. The positions that some of our sister cities in and not far from my home have taken are the wrong message. And I vow to work harder when I get home to ensure that that is not who we are. That is not who we are as educators, and that is we know we can't do this work alone. We just, not only do we have to, because we're not even fully organized within there, we have to compete with multiple teacher organizations, most of them set up by the right-wing groups, many of them set up by administrative groups that want to keep teachers from being part of a real union that actually works in our interest. So we can't work alone. We have to work with the community. And many of the organizations that we work with on our local level are some of the ones that you're very familiar with, some of the national civil rights organizations such as the NAACP. Other unions such as the SEIU is one of our strong partners. I've served on the board, and our members have consistently worked together from the leadership level down to the rank and file level with the Texas Organizing Project. They are the former ACORN group that is in Texas and in Houston, and I'm very proud of the work that we've done directly with parents with them. Many of the issues that have been brought up, I mean, we've been the home of some bad policy coming in, value-added measures, school closures, impossible teacher evaluation. We've had to fight all those issues, and we couldn't do it without the partnerships that we built with our parents. Some of the victories that we've been able to pull out of this, and I'll use another term that I heard from Chicago. You know, Texas is a Republican state, but you have to have DFER-minded individuals on our school board if you're going to win it. So they put a lot of money into our city and our school district. And one of those DFER-funded school board members brought the AstroTurf organization Stand on Children to our city. Because of our partnerships, because of the people that we work with, we ran them out. They closed their doors. The next thing we did was hire the damn organizers and put them on the righteous path. We've also won issues such as when we talk about corporate reform coming in, it is truly about profits. Valero Energy is a major corporate entity in Texas. They were out asking for millions and millions of dollars in tax rebates that were coming out of the pockets of our schools at a time when we had taken the most drastic cuts to public education funding in the history of our state. You know, it may not sound like much, but when we were able to build those partnerships and get out in front of schools to sell the $8 million brownies to pay Valero's tax bill that they wanted, we were able to hit the media. We were able to create a message that resonated with parents, resonated with our community, and we were able to fight those pieces back to the point none of the other energy companies in Houston wanted to touch that issue, and Valero backed off and stepped away. Those are the kind of things that you can win when you work with your parents and your community.
In 1999, in 6 hours, legislation was passed in both chambers of the state legislature and signed by the governor to take over schools in Philadelphia. 6 hours. And that legislation said that when our collective bargaining agreement expired, that we would not be able to keep one word of it. We had 35 years of bargaining history at that time. So in order to continue to have a contract, we had to negotiate every word of a new contract. We have a legislature and the governor's mansion totally controlled by the Republican Party. And all Democrats in both chambers are not our friends necessarily either. We have a Democratic mayor who is not our friend either. Two years ago, the school district hired the Boston Consulting Group and asked them to look at the school system and find ways to make the system more efficient. And they recommended closing 60 schools in the 1 year and closing 6 schools each year for the next 4 years. As a result of the Boston Consulting Group's report, that, by the way, no teacher, no classroom assistant, no principal, nobody from the union was asked to weigh in on helping to formulate that plan. And so I called on a number of community organizations in the city of Philadelphia to come to our office and to talk about 2 minutes, she says. I've got a long story. To talk about what that Boston plan was going to do with the destruction of the Philadelphia School District. And that is how the Philadelphia Coalition for Public Schools began, PCAPS. And we began working and fighting and attending meetings and educating our parents about what was going to happen to their neighborhood schools. Did we have school closings? Yes. Instead of 60, 24 were closed. 3 schools were converted, public schools were converted to charter schools. We continued to fight. The district is woefully underfunded. And because it is so underfunded, we have 87 charter schools in the city of Philadelphia. $700 million out of the district's budget went to charter schools this year. It is the only line item that is growing in the 5-year budget that the district has. We've been working with our parents so that they understand what is happening to the funds that we have in the school district. And we have been in negotiations for the last 18 months now for a successor agreement. And instead of negotiating fairly at the table with us, the district filed a plea before the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, which, by the way, that takeover legislation says that any issue related to the takeover legislation has to go directly to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. And the district asked the court to allow them relief from having to adhere to language in the collective bargaining agreement that they had reached with us from the time that the district was taken over by the state. When I tell you that it was probably the biggest challenge that the union has faced since it won the right for collective bargaining, it was. And about 2 weeks ago, the court responded, and they said that they would not hear the case. We won. It means that we will continue to be able to collectively bargain. It means that the district will not get relief to be able to eliminate counselors from schools when they choose to do that, to eliminate librarians, to eliminate school nurses, even though we had 2 children die last school year because we didn't have a nurse on duty. So it's been a big battle for us, but because of the work that we've done with community organizations and with clergy, we as a union have been able to fight back and to ward off the many things that they've tried to do. And the goal is to just destroy the PFT. There is no question about it. They want to destroy the union, and we're determined that they're not going to do it, and the parents are with us.
I think it's a wonderful thing that at an AFT convention, you have a room like this discussing this subject.
Yes. Yeah.
This was not the environment 2 years ago or 4 years ago. So that says a lot about all of us as union leaders, because we have to recognize the fact that everyone in this room is a union leader in their local. We all understand, if you're here tonight, you understand that our strength is now in organizing with community. Every state has different laws. Every state has different legislatures, governor's rules, how they get their budget done. We have a lot of enemies who are very smart with a lot of money, who will leave no stone unturned in trying to kill teacher unions in their states. That is not debatable as far as I'm concerned, and if you don't believe that, you shouldn't be in this room. This is not easy stuff anymore. It's life or death for our public school systems and for so many of our members. So first you have to analyze what is your situation. What can they use to hurt you in your individual level? I always talk to Karen. Karen and I talk a lot. I can't stand the fact that she's a Democratic state and the Democrats are killing Karen. Drives me nuts. And there is no such thing as far as we are concerned at the UFT in terms of what party you belong to. It is very simple. Are you with the corporate reform agenda, or are you with community and teachers? That is the line we decide. My mayor, the old mayor, we knew what he was doing. He wanted to take his education agenda, use New York City as a way to amplify it, and then to spread that, use that with everybody else and spread it across this country. It is no coincidence that 2 months before Rahm Emanuel became mayor of Chicago, he was in Lake Tahoe with Michael Bloomberg, who was telling him how he'd be there to support him and help him with his education agenda. So when our mayor went to Washington, D.C. and bragged, because remember Arnie Duncan, remember he's going to close the worst schools, the worst schools, the worst schools? And Arnie Duncan said, we need to close the 100 worst schools in the United States. Michael Bloomberg, standing right next to him, say, Arnie, I'll do you one better. I'll close 200 schools in New York City. Now, a lot of the media wasn't paying attention to that, but that got my attention since I was president for 4 months. I said, I know clearly where this man is going. He's going to close the schools. He's going to use the state legislature. He's not going to bargain with us. He's going to try to change our seniority rights, LIFO. He's going to try to change the rights of an individual school if he closes it. He's going to go after laws at the state level. So we decided 2 things at that moment. One, every time Michael Bloomberg went to close a school in New York City, we would make it like he was going for a root canal or a proctologist, whichever one was working. And the only way we could do that was by working with the teachers and the parents at the school that was affected. You all right back there? We can hear you that, nothing else. It's good. The other piece was our state legislature. It's set up in New York State that the governor has all this control during the budget. But he has to have both, he can play the Senate off of the Assembly. The problem was our state Senate had 4 really bad, what I call defers, in their house. So we said we were going to figure out a way to start changing the political landscape of the state Senate. And there was 2 ways to do it. One, take out a Republican. New York State at that point, 99.8% incumbents count around. Now he won long, I got to go long. So we found a 33-year incumbent in Queens and found out that he was not paying attention to his own district. He was servicing the part of the district that was always there. He forgot and didn't recognize the fact that there was a whole new part of his district that was diversified. So we went out there, we got them all registered, they showed up on vote day. It was the UFT against every other union in our city and state. It was one union that stood with this candidate, and we took out a 33-year incumbent out of the state Senate. Cycle, I was proud to say there wasn't a single defer left in the New York State legislature. We took them out. Every closing school became a media nightmare for the mayor. Our mayor was a great foe. He was arrogant and stubborn. We took his approval rating, as I said earlier this year, from in the mid-70s for education. By the time we were done with our campaign, it was 20% approval rating on education. We shifted resources in the union. We cut tons of spending and put it into community organizing. We hired full-time organizers. We did events that no one could even have imagined. Whatever the community wanted, we did not go to them and say, this is what public education, we need your help, they're trying to kill us. We said, what do you need? Tons of things where we're homeless. Economic inequality is growing in New York City. It's still sad for me that even up to this day, when I first started as president, there were 11,000 children in homeless shelters. There are now 58,000 children in homeless shelters in New York City. That's what Michael Bloomberg's policies do. So it was more about engaging them. But now we're on the other side. And this is a new area for us. Our campaign worked. But now, you know, I have members who are upset with me. We have a contract where parents have voice inside of my contract. How do we feel about that? Not about due process or any of those issues. But if you want to change how your school schedule goes, you need parents' permission. And I have members who are saying, why do parents have a say in a contract provision? And that's something we have to own. If we're going to be serious about this, then we got to figure those things out and get our members ready for that. You heard on the thing this afternoon about the mayor talking about pros. What he didn't tell you is a school can't go into it. Forget about the membership vote, which is 65%. I agree, unless you have a large portion, you don't do it. But you can't even get to that unless the parent leadership of a school signs off on it. So we're dealing with a little bit of that controversy. And we're telling our members, those parents stood by our side. We had laws in our state, and we knew that our mayor was trying to provoke us to do things to break those laws. And he had a bevy of lawyers ready to kill us through the judicial system. And those parents stood with us. And if you're not going to be real, it's great if you're there fighting for their school, they love it. But when we get through it, and I am happy we're on the other side, and I hope I never got to get back on the other side with the fight. But you never know, because they all want my mayor dead. But you got to do something real for those parents. Those parents are very happy that we gave them that right inside of our contract. First time ever in the history of the United Federation of Teachers that parents have rights inside of our contract. And we're now dealing with our members who are upset about that. So if we're going to have this conversation about community organizing, we're all mad about education, correct? Yep. Yeah. Right? We'll debate tomorrow about Arnie Duncan. I think it's simple. I think we shouldn't waste a damn breath. He's irrelevant, and we should just leave him that way. I'm not getting involved, I could care less. We're mad about that. But if we're really going to move our country and education forward, we have to have real relationships with the community. And when we have chance, we have to be able to take that extra step. Just as we just did, where we told parents, you have rights inside of a teacher's contract that you have never had before. And that to them said, you said if we stood with you, you would be there for us, and that you, your union, your members have kept your word. And that's why I think the next step is after this fight.
We started looking both internally and externally. We realized we had to move forward in both in our union and outside of our union at the same time. And so externally, we started by looking for those issues that were related to children and families. And it was very easy then to connect the dots as to why these things matter to us. So a couple really early examples. One was in 2006, we began working with the Second Chance Coalition in Minnesota. Second Chance Coalition is a group of organizations in the community in Minnesota work on felon reenfranchisement, as well as social justice and social justice issues within the criminal justice system. All right, we'll try. So we started working with the Second Chance Coalition in Minnesota on issues of, is that too hard now? On issues of felon reenfranchisement as well as voting rights. As well as voting rights and making sure that everyone had equal access to the voting booth. And our justification in doing that was that a second chance for adults is often a first chance for kids. And so that made a real difference. And then in 2006 and 2007, we worked with the Children's Defense Fund on their Cover All Kids bill. That was a bill to get universal health care for all children in the state of Minnesota, regardless of their parents' employment status. And we worked on that because we also saw that our school nurses, their offices were being treated like triage centers, like urgent cares. And our nurses gave amazing testimony, and that resulted in 43,000 more students, or more children in the state of Minnesota having access to health care by the time we were finished with that. Our members were incredibly motivated and empowered with those first steps, and that really opened it up for our members to then start coming to us with other issues in the last 7 to 8 years, where they then knew that their union was a place to practice their social justice feelings. And so it was then became very obvious that members wanted to come to us and talk about what was our union going to do to work on issues of comprehensive immigration reform. What was our union going to do when Republicans in our state put two incredibly bigoted constitutional amendments on our ballot in 2012, wanting to limit the right to marry and wanting to limit the right to vote. What was our union going to do? And our members knew that we were going to take a stand on those things. So I want to talk a little bit internally, though. We knew we had to get our internal house in order as well. And so one of the things we talked about in 2007, going into our 2007 contract negotiations, we were committed to scrubbing our contract of any bias or institutional privilege that was built into it, whether it was accidentally, historically, however it got in there. And I'll give you one example that came from our community and personal experience of teaching alongside teachers as well. We have a really vibrant immigrant community in St. Paul. And so often what we would have is we would have teachers who were not citizens yet, or perhaps their parents weren't citizens yet. And those teachers wanted to take time off to help a family member get citizenship or to earn their own citizenship. That came out of their personal leave. Where I was born in this country, I had citizenship, I did not have to use my personal leave for that. So it was a very simple thing. We said, we want citizenship leave that does not get deducted from someone's personal leave, and we don't want it to ever be exhausted. Because if I need to work on my citizenship, but then I want to help my mom with her citizenship, I don't want to have to actually be penalized at the end of my career when my born citizen sister gets to trade in all of the sick days and personal days she didn't use, but I am actually trading in fewer of those days for my retirement. And we were able to scrub our contract of those sort of biases that were motivate, again, we're not intentional, but we said if we're going to attract and retain the most vibrant, diverse workforce that knows how to meet the needs of kids, our contract is going to be the place that does that for us. And so we look for those opportunities internally as well. Finally, very specific to negotiations, and this echoes Alex's idea of this democracy. We opened up negotiations. Minnesota has a state law that says public employee negotiations are open meetings, so anyone can participate or anyone can go observe. We decided to actually take advantage of that. So in 2009, we took this baby step where we were training this contract action team, and we sort of were training as we went along, and we started inviting our members in to watch after we talked to them about a specific issue. We wanted them to come watch, and we finished that contract negotiation cycle, and we had about 70 people participate all told, which was through the whole cycle, which felt really healthy. And we decided, you know what, in 2011, we're going to do it a little better. And so in 2011, we actually launched a formal contract action team training. These were people trained to come watch our negotiations, communicate back and forth between their site and our bargaining team, as well as any community member who came to watch our negotiations. They were trained to have a conversation next to that community member to explain collective bargaining, to explain the benefits of this open meeting law, and to explain what was behind some of the contract language we were asking for, such as special ed caseloads or smaller class sizes, etc. So then in 2013, after 2011, we focused on how did open negotiations go? How did that feel? And we decided that we were absolutely committed to it. So in 2013, we did ourselves one better. We decided before we even put together a bargaining team, we were going to actually go to parents and community members and ask them what they wanted us to prioritize in our contract negotiations. And through a series of, through a series of book clubs and study groups, listening sessions, and surveys, we spent from November of 2012 to April of 2013, community designed the contract proposals they wanted us to prioritize. It was definitely a speak even if your voice shakes moment. What were they going to bring up? What were they going to say? But you know what? We realized that any of those things we were scared of, people were talking about those things anyway. Why not have the conversation directly with folks? But sure enough, when we sat down, and you heard this echoed from our brothers and sisters up here as well, when we sat down and said, what do the schools St. Paul children deserve? Who are the teachers St. Paul children deserve? And what is the profession those teachers deserve? Sure enough, parents, community members, students, rank and file members who are engaged in the process said things like, bring back art, music, and physical education. We want a nurse, a counselor, social worker, and a librarian for all our kids. We want smaller class sizes. And a handful of middle-class elementary schools we actually have in St. Paul said, and you know what? We want even smaller class sizes in high-poverty schools than we would have in our handful of middle-class elementary schools. We want authentic family engagement. One of the things we struggled to get from our district was power over our parent-teacher conferences, which quite frankly were designed for people like me only like 4 decades ago, right? They were designed for moms, likely, who could spend a little time before they made dinner, but after the kids got home, to pop in and check in on how parent-teacher conferences were going, and those just weren't working for us. And wrestling the power away from designing an authentic, culturally relevant parent-teacher conference was like pulling teeth. Or actually, maybe I like the proctology example better. But we got it. When parents were in the room with us and we explained why we wanted the power to design culturally relevant conferences at our school sites, parents got it. They fought alongside us for it, and we got it. And so opening up contract negotiations is really sort of the next phase in our work in progress that is the social justice unionism in St. Paul. So thank you very much.
So this is awesome. Look around. Look around. Look around. This needs to be our unionism. And so this is amazing and remarkable, and I just want to thank all of you for driving this, because you can't just have it as one district, because when it's one district, it's an outlier. When you see all these districts, there are the 3 largest districts of the United States of America, unions that are represented up here, and then 3 really badass districts on top of it. This starts making a movement. If these things become enduring, if they don't become one-stops, and they don't become one-offs, it becomes a movement. And so the only reason I want to stop by, I actually wanted to just peer in. I told Alex that I would try to spend a lot of time here. I've just been in several other events that people wanted me to be in. But this is what we envisioned when we started talking about making community engagement real. And for those of you in the UFT, remember when we did CC9 a while ago, and CC9 was in the Bronx, and there was a lot of stress initially, because there were a lot of people who had never talked to each other. In some ways, as Mary Catherine said, people were really angry because since Ocean Hill-Brownsville, there was an easy way for the oligarchs to pit parents versus teachers by just doing it. And in some ways, that was what Ocean Hill-Brownsville was. And wanted to spend the money on schools. We had done more effective schools. That got thrown out, and you saw that. And in CC9 in the Bronx, some parents, including John Kest and Eric Zachary and Cynthia Williams, said, we have a really good way to try and figure out how to mentor teachers. And fast forward, I'm not going to tell you the whole story, fast forward, we actually had the parents on our side of the bargaining table against Joel Klein, who, thank God, they had Carmen Farina on their side, who helped us negotiate a mentoring and a lead teacher program, which the next year, all the schools that were affected in the South Bronx significantly improved because of this mentoring program we had done and negotiated. And that, in a real way, in some ways more than even the advocacy that Cynthia and Christine talked about today, that in a real way created real bonds. Because what that did, unlike the fight about money and equity, what that did said we had real skin in the game in terms of things that parents didn't think we would have ordinarily done. And in some ways, that's what every one of the folks here have done. Alex, first week going and fighting for the equity formula in LA. Karen getting the shit beat out of her, as well as our Chicago teachers, and making sure that people wanted a better day, not a longer day. Michael, you've heard so much, and I am so proud of what the New York City folk have been able to do to turn this around. Zeph, they don't have collective bargaining. Everything is a fight, and they have elected a couple of board members to be able to do that fight. So, we're doing the VAM suit. That's kind of like easy stuff, but the hard stuff is all the stuff they do day in and day out. Jerry, you cannot, you have to be in Philly for a day to see that what Helen said today, this is where parents are. The fact that they wouldn't take another freaking public school, it's because the parents and kids have formed a human shield around the schools. And Mary Catherine just told that story. I'm going to throw out a challenge to all of you, which is, it would be my fondest hope and dream, if I'm reelected tomorrow, to have this be what you guys are talking about, this be what characterizes our union going forward. And if this is what characterizes our union going forward, we will keep public education not like it is today, but as it needs to be to help every single child. And where you have the collective wisdom and the professional latitude, because it's not just the union, but it's parents and kids, sorry. It's parents and kids saying thank you. It's parents and kids saying, I need that union and those teachers to be with us. So I walked into this room and I started crying. This is fantastic. Thank you.